Hi everyone. I'm so excited you have joined Unleashing Potential for All, Lifting Youth Voices for Equity and Justice. I'm Frank Shaw, Chair of the Board of Directors for the YMCA of Greater Seattle, and on behalf of the board, welcome to the final installment of our three-part community learning series. Hopefully, you were able to join us for parts 1 and 2 of this series. If not, please be sure to visit the Y's website to view the recordings. Both sessions were inspiring and left me hopeful and excited about the opportunities we all have to advance equity and justice, even if just in our own small neighborhoods. Every step matters on this journey. In today's session, we will lift the powerful voices of our youth. This generation of young change makers are amplifying voices of the unheard to build a better world for all. Today, you will hear their stories, their hopes and dreams for a better us. Colin Kaepernick, whose simple but deliberate actions helped inspire national conversations about justice, recently said, "If we reach common ground and can understand what everybody's going through, we can really affect change." This continued learning series is an opportunity to keep learning by hearing lived experiences so that we can advance in our own journey, step by step, to disrupt systemic racism and really affect change. It gives me great pleasure to introduce Gloria, the CEO and President of the YMCA of Greater Seattle. In 2019, Gloria was named the first woman and first person of color to lead this association in its 144-year history, and is just one of 10 black women CEOs leading Ys across the country. Gloria, let me turn it over to you.
Thank you, Frank Shaw. And we so appreciate your leadership, and I appreciate that very kind introduction. I'm Gloria Jaden, the President and CEO of the YMCA of Greater Seattle, and my pronouns are she, her, and hers. Again, good afternoon. On behalf of the YMCA of Greater Seattle's community-led board and staff, welcome. Welcome to the third event of our three-part series, Unleashing Potential for All. We're so glad you're here to learn with us, grow, and make progress with us together. This afternoon, I began by acknowledging that many of us in attendance today in the Seattle area rest on the unceded ancestral homelands of the Coast Salish people from time immemorial. In this moment, we pause to give deference to the original stewards of these lands, past, present, and future. In this moment in our history, welcoming spaces where we can gather, acknowledge, learn, heal, and build a community of equity and justice for all are more important than ever. The Y is so honored to convene and hold this space for community today. Learning from those with learned experiences is critically important to understand the challenges, the trauma, barriers, and policies that must be identified, unpacked, and addressed to disrupt systemic racism. Today, we learn together. We are committed to removing institutional and systemic barriers that result in oppression and racism, especially in Black, Indigenous, and people of color youth, families, and communities. With humility, grace, and accountability, we are committed to rooting out racism and inequitable systems in our organization, wherever they may be. This is the hard work. This is what it looks like. This is the hard work that we must do to disrupt and ultimately end racism. We invite all of you to do this hard work alongside of us and to join us in learning and building a more inclusive community so that everyone, especially the young, can be unleashed and developed to their fullest potential in spirit, mind, and body. Unleashing Potential for All is a community learning series anchored by the Y for sharing knowledge to delayer and deconstruct racism, discovering unheard voices, and activating collaborative communities. Through our collective work, we endeavor to create the generational change of equity and justice for all that we pledge to our children, our community, and each other. We're honored to have community collaborators join us in this work. The Unleashing Potential for All Learning Collective is a group of community members, nonprofit partners, businesses, foundations, government agencies, and otherwise locally and nationally that are aligned in advancing community conversations and catalyzing meaningful action to achieve equity and justice for all. We are grateful to stand together. We're also grateful for our learning partners whose generous financial support is making this learning series accessible to all, with nearly 8,000 people engaged across the country to date already, and also here in our local communities. This is such a tremendous impact on community education. I want to acknowledge our learning partners. They include Bill and Paula Clapp, Seattle Foundation, 300 Degrees Law, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, Casey Family Programs, Imagine Housing, the Lorenzini Family Foundation, the New Beginnings Christian Fellowship, Packard Parts, George Pocock Rowing Foundation, Perkins Coie LLP, REI Co-op, Washington Federal Bank, Windermere Foundation, and YWCA of Seattle, King, and Snohomish. A special thanks now to our executive producer learning partners. First, the Satterberg Foundation, which is out front convening community to advance equity in our community. Thank you for your work and partnership, Satterberg Foundation. Our next executive producer learning partner is the Laird Norton Company. Please join us now in listening to a special message from the Laird Norton Company, which reminds us how important it is to unite in community.
For 165 years, Laird Norton has known that we are stronger together.
As one of America's oldest family-owned companies,
we have always partnered with others
to enrich the communities in which we work and live.
These values are even more important now.
So across our enterprise, we're joining community partners to give back.
Because at Laird Norton, we know we are all stronger together.
Many thanks to the Laird Norton Company and the Satterberg Foundation and all of our circles of learning partners for standing with us and investing with us in this work to elevate these conversations and advance equity and justice for all. As a champion for many local, national, and international causes, fighting inequities and creating healthier lives for millions, we pause in this moment to honor and recognize Bill Gates Sr., who passed away on Monday at the age of 94. Bill's passion, kindness, and commitment to showing up for life is a legacy and model we can all aspire to. From all of us at the Y and the broader community, we say thank you, Bill. Your spirit and legacy for equity will live on in the values and example you set for us all. As we embark on part 3 of the Unleashing Potential Learning series today, the learning continues. It is our hope that the conversations won't end here today, but will compel us to initiate new discussions with our neighbors, friends, and family. This is the internal work This is the hard work, guys, that has to be done to create the lasting change we wish to see in our community. Before we dive in, I want to thank you all for the feedback you provided on this series. We've been taking it all in and watching the feedback very carefully. We're inspired that so many of you have benefited from the series. A key to becoming an inclusive and anti-racist organization is to make room for all voices and respect all feedback. In that spirit, I want to share with you some of the feedback we have received on this series thus far. We've heard how informative these series have been for our community and staff in understanding play equity. We also heard how much they appreciated learning from our panel of accomplished athletes, Olympians, and community leaders, and their willingness to use their voices and platforms to advance equity and justice. We also heard about passionate discussions that have been catalyzed among teammates and neighbors after watching A Most Beautiful Thing. We also heard about possible solutions on how we as a community can do better to elevate all voices, especially youth voices who are calling us to a brighter future and stepping up to pave the way for all of us. We also received other feedback that we should learn from and not ignore. We received feedback from our staff that we could do more to demonstrate equity and accessibility during this series. We heard them. And now I'm proud to share that we are streaming part 3 of this series on Facebook and YouTube. And also we're offering closed captioning in English and Spanish, as well as American Sign Language. We also heard from others. And you see some of those comments on the screen. One commenter demanded that we stop selling leftist propaganda and that there is no systemic racism or institutional racism in the US. Another commenter indicated that this series is division stroking that will make them never renew their membership at the YMCA. Another remarked that this series is such a racist event. And just one more. A commenter, and I quote, said, "I am not seeing trouble or injustices to Black or brown groups of people and find nothing of injustices towards the Negro people. Our Black friends are not now in slavery." I call these out, but I have to share that receiving these kind of messages has been a daily occurrence for me and my staff. It's part of what comes with the work. We choose to share these comments with you today because they provide a window into the viewpoints among us, the polarized times that we live in, and the work ahead of us. And most importantly, the opportunity that we all have to be better, continue to learn, and continue to grow. These comments are not new to us. We heard them loudly when we spoke out against the use of intense police force against our site leader, Antoine Jackson, and youth at the Kirkland Teen Union building, commonly referred to as KTUB, which was designated as a safe place for youth. This incident happened a year ago this month, and looking back, we now know that this incident was indicative of a broader national crisis for the diverse communities we serve, especially communities of color. The comments also reveal that being a community advocate for equity and justice is not without scrutiny and consequences. Nevertheless, we must continue to learn, course correct where appropriate, and remain resolved and grounded in our commitment to a better us. We must continue to invite all voices in, support everyone on their equity journey, wherever they may be, whether they are at the beginning or further down the path. This is the hard work that we must continue to do towards becoming an anti-racist organization and community. Through our work, we are modeling for our youth what true advocacy and change making looks like. A generation of change is here. Born into climate change, terrorism, and economic and racial inequities and inequalities, our youth of Gen Z are amplifying their voices, the voices of unheard that have been unheard, to create movements of action to build a better world for all of us. From social media to sports, these young people are using their spaces to activate change. Today, we elevate youth voices of today and years past to deconstruct racism and oppression through the lens of the next generation. We have an amazing group of youth voices with us today. And I am so excited to be able to sit back for a moment and listen, absorb, and learn. So first, I want to turn the reins over to our moderator. And I'm pleased to introduce Anthony Mcmillan. Let me share a little bit about Ty. You may recognize Ty from part one of the Unleashing Potential for All series. Ty is representing South King County Strong and Skyway, where he was born and raised. He is currently a rising junior at Stanford University, majoring in environmental systems engineering. Having a mom who is Filipino and a dad who is African American, his upbringing was a beautiful blend of these two cultures. Nonetheless, he still had to navigate this world with caution as a young Black man. Ty has worked in different capacities to address the injustices and inequalities facing young men and women of color. And in his community, he has worked with organizations like Northwest TAP, Connection, and learning partner Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation to bring awareness to these issues and guide educators on how they can better serve students of color. We are so happy to have Ty back with us today. Thank you for joining us, Ty. Over to you. Take it away.
Thank you, Gloria. Are you guys able to hear me? Wonderful. Thank you, Gloria. It is my pleasure and honor to join the Y community in this important journey. You joined us a few minutes before the session started. You saw the images of young athletes throughout recent history using their platform and voices to advocate for causes that they believe in and that they're pushing for change. There's no photo in history more iconic than this one, though. This is the photo of the infamous raised fist protest. This photo shows Dr. Tommy Smith and John Carlos, who stood at tops of medalist stands at the 1968 Olympics after winning the gold and bronze medals for the 200-meter race in track and field. During the national anthem, they bowed their heads and raised their gloved fists to stage a protest without a spoken word against racism. After that, they were immediately suspended from the US national team. Their medals were stripped, and they were vilified and left homeless and unemployed. A heavy personal price paid for advocacy for equity and justice. A heavy loss, but they gained an even bigger, iconic role in American activism that continues to inspire youth athletes today. We are so fortunate and excited to have Dr. Tommy Smith join us later in our discussion this evening and to hear young athletes who have been inspired by his legacy of advocacy for equity and justice. But first, let's meet our young athletes. I am honored to welcome by Rosalie Fish from Muckleshoot Tribal School and collegiate runner for Iowa Central Community College. We have Paolo Banchero from O'Day High School and Duke basketball commit. Maria Lee from Kentwood High School, Stanford University, and then to Wake Forest University. 2020 Seattle Reign OL team participant in National Women's Soccer League player. And lastly, Harrison Clark from O'Day High School and a student at Tufts University. Hello, everybody. Nice to see all your faces. So, to start us off with the opening question, could you guys please briefly introduce yourselves, your sport or extracurricular activity, and what you've been up to these days? Let's start with you, Rosalie, and then Paolo, then Mariah, then Harrison.
Wias eskechat Rosalie Fish Seatsta, Buckleshoes Abshed. In my traditional language, that is, hello, my name is Rosalie Fish, and I am from the Muckleshoot tribes. I do track and field as well as cross country, and I've been training away at my community college and just trying to keep myself afloat here in school.
Hello, my name is Paulo. I go to Ode High School. I'm a senior, and I'm committed to Duke to play basketball. And yeah, I'm from Seattle.
Wonderful, wonderful. And then we're going to take it to Mariah, please.
Hi, I'm Mariah. I'm from Covington, Washington, went to Kentwood High School, then on to Stanford University where I studied history. And then I did, go card. I did a master's in management at Wake Forest University while also playing as a grad student. And after I played abroad in Switzerland and then here with Oil Rain in the 2020 Challenge Cup. And we were the first pro sports back, and we had a bubble and played during the month of July. And in addition to soccer, I helped with one of my former history professors at Stanford who's writing a book on sexual violence against Black women from slavery through Me Too. So I'm tasked with finding all of her sources.
Wonderful. And Harrison, please.
Yes, hello everyone. My name is Harrison Clark. I am now a junior at Tufts University. I grew up in the Redmond area and my family's in Seattle now. I spent 2 years at O'Day High School, and then I went out to the East Coast where I played hockey at a school called Middlesex in Concord, Massachusetts. Hockey was my main sport growing up. My dad played and introduced me to the game, and that was all of my athletic exposure for the most part. At Tufts, I'm now studying international relations in Arabic, and I'm a musician as well. So now I'm actually just started writing my first musical, and I also do a bunch of string arrangements and orchestra arrangements and those kinds.
Harrison, we definitely have to connect. Love what you're studying, love all your interests. Very value aligned. All right, we're going to take it to the next question, you guys. It's going to be a little more serious, but I still want it to be a free-flowing conversation. This question is, I would like you guys to share about the state of equity and inclusion in your sport and the systemic barriers that you observed or experienced in whatever sport you guys participated in. And we can start with, let's go backwards. Harrison, if you don't mind.
Yeah. So, I mean, the hockey is, on the surface a very, very white sport, right? I think I started playing when I was very young. So from the age of 3 all the way up through my senior year of high school, I never had a Black teammate on any of my teams, any of my full-length season teams, right? So there would be a tournament here or there where I'd go play for a team and I'd have a Black teammate there, but never on any of my full season teams did I ever have a Black teammate. I played against so few Black players that I can actually pinpoint and remember almost all of them I played against. I can count them on my hands. And this is from growing up in Seattle, playing in Western Canada, coming out east and playing in the prep league out here. Just very, very few Black players in the sport in general. Very few players of color in general, right? I think I should also highlight that this summer has been really, really incredible for young Black hockey players. There's a team that USA Hockey put together called Next Gen AAA, which was an all Black and Latinx identifying team that won one of the most prestigious youth hockey tournaments in Boston just a month ago. They went undefeated, ran through everybody in the tournament, and won all their games by 5 or 6 goals. Just an incredibly talented group of young Black players. And seeing that to me has been very encouraging. But I think it's also important to acknowledge that the sport in of itself, in terms of access to the sport, in terms of what's happening internally and not only just in the pro leagues, but in college and youth hockey, what's being said in locker rooms, the discourse, is just very far behind, right? And I think one of the most important things that I'm trying to do now, as somebody who's a little bit removed from the game now, who, I haven't played competitively in 2 years, is looking back on my experience and trying to figure out what I can do to build a more inclusive space for players like me that come up in the future, right? So that when somebody does get to prep hockey, or when somebody does get to high school or get to college, that their love for the game won't be killed by this really toxic culture that's been built over years and years and years and years, right? So there's some really amazing pro players that are doing some great work. The Hockey Diversity Alliance was just created this year before the playoff bubble started, with really great leaders like Evander Kane of the San Jose Sharks, and Matt Dumba of the Minnesota Wild, and a few other players who have just taken the lead and done some really great work. And so I'm hoping to follow in their footsteps.
Yeah, please share some of the links, if possible, with some of our viewers, especially about that youth league that we're trailblazing with that amazing season. Paolo, if you can go next. And just to reiterate, the question was, if you could share the state of equity and inclusion in your sport and some of the systemic barriers that you may have observed while playing the sport, whatever camps you've gone to, etc.
Yeah, basketball, it's a much more universal sport. It's played all over the world by, all kinds of people.
Most definitely.
Yeah, so, there's not really, a certain group of people, I guess, that you see when you're on a basketball court. You can see really anybody out there playing. For me, basketball has been a lot of positive experiences, going to camps and stuff, playing against players, not only around the country, but around the world. It brings you closer together with a lot of people that, you may not have expected to meet or encounter. So for me, it's been good, just my whole life, as I've gotten better and older, going to new places, meeting new coaches and things like that. And, you just get a chance to bond and learn other people, how people grow up or how they live. Me personally, I didn't, know much about people from down south or the East Coast until I started playing basketball, and seeing them at camps and stuff. So for me, it was good, just getting a chance to interact with them and, just get to learn, how they live or how they started playing basketball. And everyone has a different experience. Some people, for me, I just played basketball because my mom did, and, I always watched her coach, so I wanted to do it. But some people, they got to do it because, they don't have any way out, or they got to, provide for their family. So for some people, it's life or death. For people like me, it's, for fun, but it's also, a way of life. Yeah. So.
Yeah, that's wonderful. It kind of shows the benefit to having that diversity within your sport and all the different cultural exchanges you can have. So that's wonderful. Thank you. Rosalie, if you could go next.
Oh yeah, thank you. So for cross country especially is a predominantly white and high income sport. And in my league, I raced almost completely against predominantly white private Christian schools. And I personally graduated from Muckleshoot Tribal School, which is a tribal-owned school. And for me personally, running alone was normal for me, and being the only native was it was very common. I would be more surprised to see another Indigenous person racing alongside me than to be by myself, and that was noticed for sure by my other team people, my competitors. I oftentimes, when I did show up with my Muckleshoot Tribal School uniform, I was looked at as though I shouldn't have been there, or that I didn't belong. And as the sole runner on my team for 3 years of my high school career, it was absolutely devastating to your confidence, for sure.
Yeah, I can imagine that being very tough. Mariah, if you can take it away for us, please.
Yes, so soccer, especially on the women's side, has huge economic barriers to be an elite soccer player, it takes a lot of money. And we don't have scholarships really, like them I do. You can be on me, for instance, and it's all paid for. But for female athletes, your family has to shuck out a lot of money to be able to perform at an elite level and have the opportunity to go on to play in college. And so that keeps a lot of girls from continuing to play soccer. In terms of diversity, there are now more and more Black and brown girls. But when I was growing up, I was always one of a few. Typically, there'd be some mixed girls, biracial girls, but I'd typically be the only Black woman. I think there's a huge lack of diversity in coaching. And I think we a lot of times say diversity and aren't specific. So specifically Black coaches are very absent in soccer. In college, at Stanford, I had a white head coach and I had 2 Asian assistant coaches. And we had, so we had some diversity, but there weren't any Black staff members. And that kind of translated to a lack of support for Black athletes. This was during the wake of Mike Brown and Trump being elected, and even the everyday microaggressions that you experience as a Black player. And so when you'd go to the coaching staff, for instance, they would say things like, just focus on soccer. That shouldn't affect you. I remember going to our sports psych, and he was a white man, and he was like, you're talking about race? Like, we fought this battle in the 60s. And so there was definitely a lack of support for Black players. And I think that's a direct result of having no Black staff members. That's very common in soccer.
Thank you, Mariah. We're gonna keep it moving so we can get through some more questions. The next question I have for you guys is if you guys could share some of the advocacy work and why you guys are so passionate about the work that you guys kind of do outside of your sport, maybe within your sport as well. But if there is work as well that's outside of those sports, please share on that as well. And Rosalie, if you could start.
Yeah, thank you. I would say that the first thing that drives all of the advocacy I do is specifically about getting Indigenous visibility, not only in sports, but just in role model positions in general. I will say growing up on a reservation in a low-income home and with lots of intergenerational trauma, to see another Native athlete, let alone a Native woman, was succeeding and being brave and putting herself out there, it really impacted me as a youth. And so one of the initiatives I'm definitely taking is being completely open about my past and being vulnerable with where I've come from, particularly in about, I would say about 5 years ago, I attempted to commit suicide. And so I make it very clear to any Indigenous athletes who are younger, who are looking to me, I make it very clear where I came from and where I used to be, because so much can change in 5 years. And in the some of these social economic situations that Indigenous youth are in, especially in facing increasingly high rates of suicide, it is very important for me to be that role model, that light, to say that you can rise up to, you can compete in college, right? That's not an option for a lot of Indigenous youth. And that, along with something very close to me personally, is the missing and murdered Indigenous women epidemic. It's Indigenous women are about 10 times more likely to be murdered than the national average. And I've had very many close relatives, friends who have been murdered both by police and by non-tribal offenders. And it's a very systematic racist and sexist issue. It's specifically the intersectionality that targets Indigenous women. It's something that's been invisible to non-Native communities, and I refuse to let it be invisible anymore. With all the power that I have as an athlete and the spotlight that they put us in, it is absolutely my responsibility to fight for that with everything I have.
And before we move on, Rosalie, have you been able to connect with any other youth? Has any other youth reached out to you to collaborate with you so that the burden, doesn't feel like it's all on you?
Yes, actually, my mentor, Jordan Marie Daniel, she's 31 years old, but she's actually been running for missing and murdered Indigenous women before I have, as well as youth who've reached out to me, and with a little bit of encouragement, they're starting to run with handprints as well for missing and murdered Indigenous women, and they're sharing their stories and their own personal, their personal journeys with depression and suicide attempts. And I've created, I'd say, almost like a little family of Indigenous athletes who know how it feels to be alone and who know how it feels to have somebody there who's been through it with you, because it's so rare to find sometimes.
Definitely. And participants, please refer to some of the links that are being posted in the chat. It's connected to everything that our wonderful panelists are speaking on. Paolo, if you could continue on next, and to reiterate the question again, please let us know of your advocacy work and why you're so passionate about the work, whether that's on or off the court for you.
Yeah, for me, I'm still in high school, so it's a little harder for me to, get out and, do stuff like that. But fortunately for me, I got a pretty good social media following and pretty well known. So, my outreach is more, through social media and just trying to be a good role model, to kids and to other people through there. When kids come up to me and stuff like that and tell me, that they want to, go to college and be an NBA player and things like that, especially from the inner city, you never want to tell them to not chase their dreams and stuff like that, but you also want to remind them that that's not all that they have to be. For me, I'm blessed enough to, have God-given abilities and height and things like that. But, it's okay to, be a great student or to be a doctor or be anything. You don't have to always be an athlete. A lot of kids, sometimes think that sports is the only way that they can be successful, and that's all they see. So, just reminding them that you can be, whatever you want to be, as long as you just work as hard as you can and put your mind to it. But I have done, last summer, me and a teammate of mine did a kids camp in Seattle for kids to come play basketball, learn the game, and have fun. So this year we couldn't do it because of the corona and all that stuff. But it's definitely something we're going to try and keep doing in the future, and hopefully grow it to be bigger and better.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Hearing from one of the top prospects in basketball in your age group, and you advocating and letting folks know that basketball or becoming a rapper, all these things that are stereotypically attached to especially Black and brown youth aren't the only pathways forward. And that kind of makes me think of Harrison's situation and how kind of the role models that we might see more propagated in media, them being like the LeBron Jameses, who are doing more than the work that they're than their sport, or Colin Kaepernick as well. When there are no role models necessarily being represented that often, especially in the sport of ice hockey. Harrison, would you like to talk about the advocacy that you've been doing?
Yeah, definitely. I think the biggest thing to mention that I'd be remiss not to mention is that my biggest hockey role model was my father. He introduced me to the game, drove me to and from all my practices, up and down the highway to Vancouver and back. You know, got on the ice with me, was playing with me all the time. And I mean, I can't overstate like how influential he was in just allowing me to see that, you know, a Black man can do this, and B, just like constantly reinforcing to me that I belonged in that game, I belonged in that sport. And despite all of that, right, I still got to a point in the game and to an experience where I didn't feel comfortable anymore, right? Where I had teammates that just didn't get it, right? Or I was just in situations that I'm sure I'll be able to elaborate on as we go on. But it just wasn't something where at the end of it, I felt like I wanted to be there anymore, right? And so, so much of my work now and so much of my thought patterns and connecting with other young hockey players of color is reinforcing that, wow, this game is amazing, right? And all of your teammates in the locker room have this privilege, as kind of like, as Mariah was saying earlier, have this privilege to like show up to the locker room, show up to practice and just play the game, right? You don't have to pull up and worry about some dude calling you the N-word in the locker room, or you don't have to worry about if your teammate's like, oh, like, let's play hip hop music, it's Monkey Monday, right? You don't have to worry about things like that, right? It doesn't even click with you, right? You can just go out and play the game. So, so much of what I'm trying to do is connect with as many young Black hockey players as I can and just be like, hey, you know what? Like, here's my number. I've never met you in my life, right? I see you on Instagram, right? Maybe. Here's my number. You know, if someone says something to you, call me, let's talk about it, right? Let's figure it out, because I want you to get to the point where the only thing you have to worry about on game day is showing up and playing the game, because you deserve that. And then the other part of that for me was, I think, when I started facing a lot of those things and people saying things like that to me in the locker room, I just turned to music, right? I turned to music, I turned to literature, I turned to all these Black American heroes in so many different mediums. And I listened to them and I read them and I took influences from all over the place and kind of made this kind of like mood board and also just like ethos to live by. And I try to spread that through my own music as well and my own composition. And, you know, whenever I'm playing shows or where I'm singing and whenever I'm drumming, I try to communicate that same energy of hope and faith and just pushing along, right? And so, yeah, I mean, the biggest thing though is just being available to people and letting people know that, like, yeah, someone's experienced this before and like, we're here to help you through it. And I think that's the most powerful thing, because I mean, when people do that for me, it means the world, right? And so I just want to be there for all the other kids that are coming up after me.
Thank you. And I sincerely apologize. I did not mean to at all belittle the impact your father had on your life. Sorry about that. Mariah, my apologies. Mariah, if you could go next for us, please.
Yeah, so definitely echoing what Harrison said. The environment, the team environment is huge in any sport. And to be able to thrive, you want that to be one that is positive. Also, in order to thrive in sport, kids need to have all of their basic needs met. They need to feel safe outside. Like, can they walk home and feel safe on the street in their neighborhood? Do they have food to eat? Do they have supportive people around them? All of these things are the basis for anything. And then my advocacy work would definitely lean towards the interpersonal relationships, because I always wanted to have really great relationships with my teammates, but it's hard to do that when there are ignorant comments and there are microaggressions and you can't be your full self in the space because the dominant culture is one that's really white or really elite that you don't feel comfortable in. And so I would just recently with the rain started a book club, and we had a book and article club that we discuss texts about racism in institutional ways or interpersonal ways. We talked about colorism and meritocracy and wealth inequality, and just ways for people to really understand race relations and how that can affect your teammate here and their livelihood, and just getting to a level of understanding about people who are different than you. And so I really think that in addition to protesting in the street and working within your organization, done a lot of that too, but also about those personal relationships with people and actually being able to understand what someone else goes through and the historical effects of that have been passed down through generations.
Indeed, it is definitely a multifaceted effort that we have to take sometimes, working in those personal relationships and the different spaces that we occupy. So it's wonderful to hear that you've been working in all those different ways. To move on to the next question, actually, before we move to the next question, I want to let the panelists know to make sure you reference and look at the chat sometimes every once in a while. We have the participants mentioning you guys, giving you guys words of affirmation, and I just think that's wonderful to be able to see the impact you're having real time, because Zoom, strange medium, but we're having to adjust and we're doing what we can. So to move on to the next question, this is going to be touching on the shooting that happened at the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School, and in reference to that event, the students who went to that high school, the survivors, used their voices to create change, and there were many critics that told them that they were too young to really understand the issues that they were trying to represent. And these critics, they seem to invalidate the students' lived experiences. What do you guys want to say to those critics who kind of belittle the perspective of younger people and the younger generation? I mean, we can start with Paolo.
I think that, I'm part of the younger generation. I think that, younger generation probably has more influence on society than it has ever, just with, the power of social media and just, platforms that people have at such a young age now. So I think, our voice definitely matters. And that, when we have a certain feeling about something, especially something like that, that happened at, their school, it should be heard and taken seriously. A lot of people may look at, young people, young Black people, and, think, they're uneducated or, biased opinion or anything like that. But, I think, a lot of that's not true. And then there's a lot of smart people out there that, a lot of people may not think, are smart, but, they are, and they're well educated. So I think they should be taken seriously.
For sure. Take it back to you, Mariah.
Yeah, I think young people are always kind of like the life and the force behind social movements. You think about people like Malcolm X and Huey Newton, Tupac. They were all, powerful and extremely influential and died before the age of 30. So I think to invalidate someone because of their age is just, wrong, because as you can see throughout history, like, young people have really been the change makers in society.
Indeed. Rosalie, would you like to speak on this?
Yeah, I'm 19 years old, and I started my advocacy for missing and murdered Indigenous women at 18 years old. And I definitely heard that a lot. I heard that I didn't know what I was talking about, or that I was too young to understand what was happening to Indigenous women, but the traumas that my family has experienced and Indigenous people have experienced, we don't really have a choice whether or not we get to know it. That's something that I've felt since I've been able to understand why or how women aren't in my life anymore. It's something that I really don't have a choice whether or not to speak on or to know about, because it's been happening to my family line and to other Indigenous families for generations. And it's something that has been so prevalent in our communities that it's almost passed down, knowing how it feels to be a target or how it feels to be invisible. And I would say that for the people thinking that youth invalidates our opinions, I would say instead, I think it really amplifies just how strong our experiences are, that we can't go 18 years of living without finally having to say something.
That's so powerful. Thank you. Thank you, Rosie. Harrison, would you like to close us off on this question?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that specific event and scenario is just so incredibly devastating. And I just can't for the life of me imagine anyone telling a high school student whose friends were just killed in front of them that they don't know what they're talking about, or that you can't say that because you haven't experienced this, or stop. No, I mean, they shouldn't have to watch that, right? Or that shouldn't have to happen. There's absolutely no reason, right? And so everything anybody says that was there that day, one, we should all be listening. Because I mean, that's the basis of empathy, right? It's like, if you haven't experienced something and someone else has, right? You listen. You don't just jump in and think, well, oh no, well when this happened, no, you weren't there, right? So I think the most important thing is we all need to be better just listening to people, right? And trying to understand where we're all coming from. And so many of those students are just so incredibly brave. And have continued to be since that day. And I can't say enough about how amazing the work they've been doing is. And I do hope I get to meet some of them someday, because what they've been through is unspeakable, and the work that they've continued to do after that is just absolutely incredible. So.
I'm so thankful to be on this panel, interviewing you guys, moderating this conversation. You guys are wonderful, just beautiful answers. I know I'm speaking for the attendees. I know you guys are enjoying this. Thank you for being here. To move on to the next question, and we're running a little bit low on time. We have about 17 minutes before we're going to be moving on. I want to get through as many questions as I can, but we're going to start off with this question. What advice would you give to youth and young adults who have desired to take action about what they believe, but are nervous and unsure on where to begin? What steps do you think that they should take in their activist journeys? And we're going to start with Rosalie, if you don't mind.
Okay, thank you. I think one of the best pieces of advice that I could give myself and to other youth who feel like we don't have a voice, or for youth who feel like they're constantly being gaslighted, right? Saying like, we don't know what we're going through, we can't process it. One of the bravest things that I did as an advocate, and specifically as a young Indigenous girl, was believing that I actually would have an impact. That is sometimes the hardest thing, is thinking that what you do will even matter, right? And so when I decided to dedicate my state championship race to missing and murdered Indigenous women, and specifically 4 women whose murders very heavily impacted me, 2 of which by police, and the other 2 failed in the search by police. It was a very controversial statement at the time, and still is, and I faced a lot of microaggressions during this point. specifically about my paint and me being Indigenous, people calling it war paint, even though it was paint dedicated for prayer, as well as just that heaviness that comes with representing people who are painful to think about. And the bravest thing that youth can do who want to make a change is believing that you have the strength and the power to actually change something. And as soon as you do that, as soon as you find that strength and that bravery to believe you can change something, you will. And that's the best advice I could give to a youth who needs change.
Thank you, Rosalie. Mariah, can you take it over, please?
My advice would be to young people, be yourself. Stay true to who you are. My first moment of advocacy in a formal setting was when I simply shared my story. In college, we had like a storytelling event for student athletes, and I went up there and spoke and just shared my experience as a Black female athlete. And some people thought it was radical and I shook up a lot of things, but I simply was just speaking my truth, and real change happened. We were able to get diversity and inclusion efforts into our freshman athlete orientation and with coaching staff. So sometimes it doesn't have to be intentional. You don't have to have lofty goals, just be you, and change will happen.
Yes, we gotta be ourselves and genuine, authentic. Harrison, would you like to address the question?
Yeah, definitely. My biggest piece of advice is for Black men specifically, and something that I really struggled with at the beginning of my advocacy work and still kind of am dealing with and battling with now, is constructions about how we're supposed to act and how our emotions are supposed to manifest themselves. And specifically thinking about the social construct of masculinity and how that shows up in our daily lives and the way we operate. I think for me, the biggest thing was, okay, this happened to me, so I have to deal with it. I have to figure it out, right? There's nobody I should tell about this. This is my personal thing. And I either have to fight somebody about it, or I just have to suck it up and it's going to be over, right? And I think the biggest thing is kind of growing out of that bubble and recognizing that there are multiple options, right? That being a man isn't necessarily about beating anybody up that spites you and or not feeling anything at all, right? One, that you're allowed to feel, right? You're allowed to feel anger, you're allowed to feel sad, you're allowed to cry, you're allowed to think, you're allowed to read, you're allowed to breathe, to eat, to play music, to do whatever you want, right? And that's the biggest lesson I've learned in any of this, is once I really figured that out, once I figured out that my options weren't run or fight, I really came into being who I am now, which is someone who's really comfortable with myself in just about any position you put me in. And I'm not only am I comfortable advocating for myself, but for my people. And I think that's, the biggest lesson I could have ever learned is embracing feeling different things and embracing discomfort and rising above social constructs.
Thank you, Harrison. And Paolo, could you close us off on this question? What advice would you give to youth or young adults who have the desire to take action?
Yeah, I would just say, like, don't be afraid to, speak up or stand for what's right. For me personally, I didn't just have a situation, but 2 years ago, me and a friend of mine, we got stopped by the police and got, a gun pulled on us for no reason. They thought we had did something, but they had us, had mistaken us. And I just remember after it happened, me and him didn't really we just wanted to get past it and act like, it didn't happen. It was a messed up situation and we just didn't want to really think about it anymore. But, after when you see what goes on in other parts of the country and stuff like that, we talked as friends, and, we came to our parents and wanted to create some change. So, and then we did that in a couple ways. So that was probably thing for me, you know, just not settling and just kind of letting that, you know, go under the rug, you know, trying to, you know, fight for change and for policy changes and stuff like that. So yeah, not being scared to, you know, step up.
Thank you, Paulo. And with all that hard work, and there are probably people who are continuing to do work themselves, how are you guys practicing self-care while you are on these arduous journeys of advocacy? Mariah, would you like to start? Share how you've been taking care of yourself.
Yes, I love surrounding myself with other Black women who have similar experiences. And even with COVID, like I try to virtually, through group chats and things like that, still have people who are really supportive and can understand what I'm going through. So that is very helpful in during trying times.
And Harrison, how are you de-stressing?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest ways is my music. I think that's always a real safe space to retreat to. But as of late, it's been my bike. I've been on my bike every single day. I don't know how many cycling enthusiasts there are out there, but I keep getting more and more into it. And I feel like I'm at the point of no return. Like I'm too deep into the cycling world now to think about much else. I don't know if anyone's watching the Tour de France out there, but it's getting pretty intense. But yeah, that that for me right now is my thing. I'm on my bike every single day for at least an hour. So.
Very cool, very cool. And do you have any music out on Spotify or SoundCloud that you would be comfortable sharing with our participants and with us panelists?
Yeah, I do. I have some music out on Spotify under the name. I'll type it into the chat.
Thank you, Harrison.
It's some stuff that I did a while ago, but if you want to check me out on Spotify, it's there.
Appreciate it. And Paulo, how are you taking the time to take care of yourself?
Yeah, you know, for me, just music plays a big part of my life. You know, sometimes I just sit in my room and just have music playing. But I would say the main thing is going to the gym. I go to the gym every day. You know, it's just my way of therapy. You know, it's a form of exercise. And exercise in general can be, you know, therapeutic to a lot of people. Just, you know, gets your mind off whatever you may be stressing about. So music and working out, I don't really read or anything like that, but I would say surrounding myself with friends too. You know, not being alone for too long. You know, you shouldn't go, you know, a week or two without seeing a friend or something like that. You know, you want to surround yourself with positive energy. So I would just say those things.
Thank you, most definitely. And Rosalie, thank you for your honesty earlier, sharing about your personal experience that happened a couple of years ago. How have you been taking care of yourself now, and what is that looking like for you today?
I think, you know, one of the hardest forms of self-care for me personally is accepting that I need to do self-care in the first place. I think especially people of color and women of color, you know, we need to do everything on our own, because when we need help, oh, well, you know, now we're being like stereotyped into this group. Well, of course that Native woman needs help, you know, she could have never done this on her own. So I'm constantly trying to show people I don't need help. I don't need you, right? But I found a few teammates here, you know, a few family members on my team, and I straight up just go and I cry in front of them, and I show them and reflect on how I'm feeling, and I go around the people who aren't going to gaslight me. I go around the people who are going to validate me and see me, you know, all of me for who I am and my experiences and what I value, and also especially when it really gets tough with like the advocacy and going against the current sometimes. For me, it's putting myself, you know, back into my culture. I'm away from home and I'm away from my reservation. So just like listening to like my powwow music, like recordings from powwows at home, or, you know, just looking back at moments with my community and remembering, why do I do this? You know, why am I here? Why am I putting myself out there? Why am I pushing myself. I mean, yes, we all want to do well, but when it comes down to it, I have my whole community, depending on me, and their love, even from however far away, they don't have to say anything, but their love and the work that they put into who I am, it can heal me sometimes.
So beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing. And to serve as a foreshadowing of who we will be inviting next, I'm going to talk a little bit about Tommy Smith and John Carlos from the 1968 Olympics, how they lost their careers, their Olympic medals, and earnings that left them in debt and homeless. Colin Kaepernick lost his NFL career in his prime, yet all these athletes have become icons in American activism. Taking a stand comes with personal risks, and yet the potential of impact on the community can be transformational. How has Dr. Tommy Smith and others like him inspired and prepared you guys for your advocacy journey? And Paolo, if you do not mind starting.
Yeah, I think that I give a lot of credit to guys like Colin Kaepernick and Tommy Smith because they were like the trailblazers. They were the very first to do it. It came at the cost of their careers, lost them a lot of money. You see everyone doing it now and on the NBA and NFL, which I think is great, but I think a lot of the reason why everyone's doing it is because it's okay now. They know they aren't going to get punished now, so that's why you see a lot of people doing it. But for guys like Colin Kaepernick and Tommy Smith, they did it just because they, wanted to stand up for what was right, no matter what it costs. They were willing to sacrifice for justice and for change. And so I think that, being said, they deserve, a lot of the credit, in my opinion. So, yeah.
Thank you. Very true. Very true. Mariah, how have activists and athletes like this inspired you to take on your advocacy journey?
Yes, they're so inspiring. However, to be honest, when Colin Kaepernick was kneeling, I wanted to kneel so bad, but I felt like I would be punished for it. So I didn't. And I didn't have the courage at that point in time. So I can't even imagine that, the amount of courage you have when you are the first person to do something like that. And it kind of just shows you how incredible they were. And it's hard. It's very hard to take those steps and to be ready for the backlash.
Most definitely. And I think you would agree that even if you don't feel like you have enough courage at that initial point, slowly building on that courage by educating yourself and by learning and continuing to understand the issue in its whole form, to build up that courage, I think is something that, is honorable and shouldn't be diminished at all either, Harrison, do you mind sharing on this?
Yeah, I mean the image of Dr. Tommy Smith and John Carlos it's iconic to begin with. And I actually had the chance to meet John Carlos a few years ago, and there's that experience in of itself, and just speaking with him and recognizing that not only just the courage that it took to do that, but the courage that it took for both of them to do that. At such an athletic peak, right? After winning gold and bronze in the 200-meter dash at the Olympics, right? That's massive. The implications of that are huge, right? Some of the fastest men in the world. For Colin Kaepernick to be a fluke power outage away from a Super Bowl ring, and then to kneel and potentially gave up his whole career, right? To say that until we address these issues, right, that make us subhuman, we don't care about your Olympics, right, or your medal or your Super Bowl or any of that, right? just the sheer courage of an act like that is incredible. And honestly, it's inspiring beyond athletics. It's inspiring every single day, in anything that I'm doing. So.
Thank you. And Rosalie, I apologize for having to cut you short, but if you could keep it to a little brief statement on and just add a little bit to this before we move on.
Yeah, I'll keep it really brief. I just want to say that I admire, these trailblazers because they demanded that you look at us as more than just athletes. Like, we're people. This is survival, and clearly it has made such an impact on our athletes today and what we will accept as far as how you view us. We are not just your entertainers. We are people, and we are complex, and these are the things affecting us, and I will not allow you to ignore them. And I greatly admire that.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody, for your wonderful statements and everything that you guys shared with us today. Speaking about Dr. Tommy Smith, we will now take a moment to watch a short interview from 2019 by CBS Evening News, where Dr. Tommy Smith was interviewed. So let's learn together, you guys.
It's one of the most iconic moments in sports history, the raised fist protest at the 1968 Olympics. Special correspondent James Brown says 51 years later, the Americans who staged that protest are entering the U.S. Olympic Hall of Fame.
Tommy Smith's fist was the highest. He had just won the 200-meter gold medal. Right next to him was bronze medalist and teammate John Carlos.
People could not understand. It was not about the flag. It was a chance. The idea that we must eradicate stupidity called racism.
It was a statement through symbolism. The gloved fists represented power.
The head bowed represent prayer or faith. The feet with the pants rolled represented poverty. One of the most important things was making a statement without saying a word.
The reaction was swift. Smith and Carlos were suspended from the national team and immediately sent home. They were vilified, at one point homeless and unemployed.
Although I had 11 world records, I was washing cars just to feed my son. I couldn't find a job because they viewed me as a radical person who was dangerous.
Smith and Carlos eventually recovered. Both coached and taught in college and high school. Today, at 75 years of age, Smith says his induction into the Olympic Committee Hall of Fame is bittersweet.
Is this in some way an admission on the organization's part? We were on the wrong side of history? I think they begin to see that now, yes. It was the right thing to do.
While induction is an honor any athlete would treasure, he shared with me a letter that he plans to read at Friday's ceremony.
My crime, taking advantage of a moment and a platform to call attention to injustice.
A dream long deferred for two courageous young men. James Brown, CBS News, Atlanta.
Tommy Smith once said we had to be seen because we couldn't be heard.
With that, you guys, it is my honor that I introduce and welcome Dr. Tommy Smith to our panel. Dr. Smith began life quietly, born in 1944 in Clarksville, Texas, the seventh of 12 children. And today, his historic achievements make him a nationally and internationally distinguished figure in African-American history. He's the only man in the history of track and field and to hold 11 world records simultaneously. During this historical 19th Olympiad in Mexico City in the summer of 1968, Dr. Smith broke the world in Olympic records and became the 200-meter Olympic champion. As the Star Spangled Banner played in the wind, Dr. Smith and John Carlos stood on the victory podium, draped with their Olympic medals. Each raised a clenched fist covered in black leather glove in a historic stand for Black power, liberation, solidarity, and so much more. This courageous, unexpected worldwide event propelled Dr. Smith into the spotlight as a human rights spokesman, activist, and symbol of African-American pride at home and abroad. Cheered by some, jeered by others, and ignored by many more, Dr. Smith made a commitment to dedicate his life, even at great personal risk, to champion the cause of oppressed people. Dr. Smith, welcome, and thank you for joining us, and thank you for your unyielding advocacy against racism for the benefit of us all.
Thank you, Ty. Thank you very much. And it's very powerful what I've heard over the past half hour, 45 minutes of student athletes talking about the situations they have, situation of today, and situations certainly in the future, because your voices are very, very potent. Listening to the athletes and being a part of this panel is something even I can learn from. And one of the biggest things is seeing people, young folks, not afraid to stand up and take a stand and make an effort to continue that stand. So I'll keep my stuff short so we can move on to other questions.
Thank
but
you
I'm very
so
happy
much.
to be here.
It's my pleasure. So to start us off with the question, if you don't mind taking us back to the day in 1968 and share with us your personal experience and how you planned for that moment and all the different symbolisms that we kind of saw a little bit of in the video, but all the different symbolisms in the stance you and John Carlos took that day.
That was a while ago, but I still have memories because during that time, it was a beginning of athletes begin to stand up, mostly stand up and be seen, but not heard. The Olympic Project for Human Rights, or the OPHR, was a widespread platform in these United States to acquire the energy, the effort, the pride, and the braveness just for us to think of this big bulge of energy that was there but was afraid to be used because it had never been done before. Since the movement, the platform started at San Jose State University, the university I was attending at the time, had not graduated, but I was attending at the time, started there, and we thought it very necessary to point this energy toward a door that was closed. It had door paraphernalia, but it hadn't been opened. And we wanted to open it to generate an effort for young Black men to take a stand. We were the fastest men in the world, fastest young men in the world, and we thought it very necessary to do something other than run fast, break world records, set world records. We wanted to open that door and get a foot in. We knew that there were going to be repercussions because of it, especially where it was going to be done and how it was going to be done. Understand something. The OPHR moved to that direction, but the victory stand was extra. It was part of the Olympic Project for Human Rights. We didn't know we were going to do this until the athletes decided, I say athletes now as a congregation, decided not to boycott, but make an effort to show how we felt about a country that did not represent us, although we were representing them with pats on our back, handshakes, all of the things that should have been done before and noted by voice that we were somebody. But we didn't have to be told this. We wanted to hear it, yes. So we showed that in our races, but nothing was said to indicate we are proud of you. So we made a stand. And the Olympic Project for Human Rights, or the Victory Stand, were the ending of a platform over a year and a half, maybe longer, had been developed. And that's how it got started. Young athletes moving forward, doing something. I heard a lot of the statements from you young athletes, and that's how we started. And we continued, but we didn't all walk in the same line. We didn't even walk in the same latitude, but we were going forward. And some of the athletes made it out, some of the athletes quit, but we could not do this. John Carlos and Tommy Smith could not. San Jose State was our school, our alma mater, and we had to do something. Sacrifice didn't matter to us. We had to make a stand. Not maybe or wanted to, we had to make a stand for future generations.
Thank you so much. Could you speak a little bit about some of the other symbols that were on your bodies, whether that was a patch, as again, like we saw in the video, the rolled up ankles being a reference to poverty. What other symbols were in that stance that day?
Well, I do believe you heard the rolled up pants leg to show the idea of poverty, bowed head in prayer, because that's what I was doing, being a background of a Christian faith. And of course, the raised black fist represented power. You can call it black power, you can call it human power, you can call it power to the people, call it what you want, but it has to be forward momentum, because we had no time to speak. We had to be heard through our silent gesture. In fact, it was called a silent gesture, heard around the world. So when you view that, that's you on that victory stand, not just Tommy Smith. That's you. That's you making the effort that we hope that you would do at a later date, and you are doing it because you see in that young athletes doing what you would like to do today, or do something that's related to this today. And what I heard throughout the panel, I'm very proud to know that you're already doing it. You're already making a stand. You're making a stand verbally, which we didn't have the chance to do then, but we did get our foot in the door, didn't we? And now we're moving. I have been teaching it for 36 years, college level, and I'm very proud that I put something out there that can be used. I'm just kind of sitting back now and finding out it worked. And young folk, it's going to work for you, but you must continue a dedicated effort and prepare yourself before you do it. It's very difficult to say, oh, I didn't mean to do that. No, once you say it, you must continue that platform. So think before you act.
Definitely got to think before you act. To shift the conversation a little bit, we're going to talk about allies, and if you can please pull up take another look at the iconic photo from 1968. This time, it's going to be, it might not be what the people expected, but if we could focus on the silver medalist Peter Norman, Dr. Tommy Smith. I read an article learning that you carried you were at his funeral procession, and that he had a role in this that many people did not understand or even know or hear of. Could you please tell us about him and his advocacy work, which is not well known by many?
As you young athletes know, the world of athletic competition is one of the ways that you really can get to know others, to know them in a way that no other person would know them but oneself. Yeah, Peter Norman was an Australian. His whole family had a Salvation Army background where they worked in the street trying to help people. And the first thing I noticed about Peter when I first met him, I didn't know that he had the speed that he had. So I had to be careful there too. When you're running in races like this, you see the person and don't negate the idea that that person is just as fast as you are. And if you're running for a gold medal, then you have to technically understand that there's a reason. But this young man, I call him a young man because he'd been gone for some time. At that time, he was a couple of years older than myself, had in his heart the feeling of a humanistic attitude, dealing with the inside of a person and not how a person looked, but though I knew but that particular situation of how people look, that's what pushed me to indicate my need to fight systematic racism, and seeing a person and going beyond that sight, going into the person's heart to identify the attitude of them helping in a certain particular situation. And all the athletes, you should know that. Don't degrade a person because of color. It's not that individual person's fault, but it's what that color represents. So move forward to identify the need to love and not to hit the negative part of survival. So he did have an understanding of the humanistic attitude. No, he cannot see Tommy Smith or John Carlos because he was standing in front of us. But I do feel that he had the same idea of movement forward in terms of eradication of stupidity. See, on the left shoulder, he has an Olympic Project for Human Rights button, as John Carlos and I had. Once he got back home, they destroyed this man because he stood in solidarity with that idea. The Olympic Project for Human Rights. It wasn't Black rights, Latino rights, brown rights. It was for human rights, which encapsulate everything and moving forward. I could not take one thing, mash it down, and come up with a smile on my face unless everybody was represented so I could talk conversational as we're doing today. Move forward with a justification and identification of power, of movement, not just because you are, but because you must do.
Thank you so much for shedding light on that, shedding light on that story that many people may have not thought of was associated with that iconic image, especially with all the arguments of why don't all lives matter. When we're talking about Black Lives Matter, we are talking about how every human life has value in this world. It's just Black lives have not been validated, and it's wonderful that you guys, all three of you, were standing in with that essence in your hearts at that moment, despite the image displaying a different narrative and people maybe assuming that he was, against it or whatever, just because of the color of his skin. Thank you so much for shedding that light and showing how allyship is in the heart and can manifest in so many ways. That's so helpful for the cause and the movement.
A point of interest. Mm-hmm. Student athletes, this question has a mighty big onslaught of necessities. Australia also have its type of Black folks, the Aboriginal sector of that nation. There was an athlete who also stood in solidarity. A few athletes later on down the line, and that's why I viewed Peter and I talked to him about this particular individual, and he indicated that there are problems, Aboriginal problem as Black problem here in this country. So we talked about that. Mighty interesting. So I'm sure the athletes will look that up and see the racism that strike that part of this globe.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. Definitely will take the time to look into that. To continue moving forward, I'm gonna ask a question about your induction into the Olympic Hall of Fame. Can you tell us a little bit about that experience and how it was bittersweet?
In 1968, I held numerous world records, speed records on the track. That race, that day, October 16th, 1968, in the early afternoon, kind of coded an issue of need to be recognized because of the attitude of America, social situation, social identification. The need to understand what happened is the idea of it could not have been any more degrading visually then than the need now to make more stands like these stands, like the Colin Kaepernick stand, like the stand that the basketball, football players, soccer players, tennis players are making today. We all have a stand that we must tally, visualize, and move forward because of. The idea and the need will always be a part of life because life is a need. The vision of moving forward is a sacrifice, no matter how one look at it. Once you step through that door must remain open, but it cannot remain open if you step through the door, turn your back on it forever and say, I made it, I'm happy. No, you're not happy until you make a systematic change to help others through that same door. Now, I hit those points around the main point because it's as important to talk about once you enter. Athletes, student athletes, you have entered that door, and your responsibility is unimaginably huge, as life is at birth. You have come to a door, and you cannot close it, and you cannot walk away from it unless you take somebody with you. And that's going to be the identifying fact in your futures now. I better end that because we can talk an hour about the same thing. And the athletes, you must keep that open mind.
To bring it back a little bit,
yeah.
Moving on to the next question. What advice, words of wisdom, inspiration, and encouragement do you have for some of our attendees and us young panelists?
That's always a question which kind of tatters anyone's thought process when they're talking about moving forward because there's so many ways you can move forward, but you have to identify that case for you. A lot of the athletes, especially the high school student, talking about he's young, he's have a ways to go. Yes, but what you said this day can certainly give you the power indications of your need to not change the story, but you're going to be telling that story the rest of your life. You can use words to change words, but the identification must be the same. I challenge all of you who feel a need that standing courageously is a necessity, and it is. Simply prepare prayerfully, proceed positively, pursue persistently, and plan purposefully. You take those, you join them together, and your step will be forwarded. But you must take that strain because the next step is going to be even more difficult, and you're going to have even more energy to explain yourself as you move forward because people are going to talk to you now because you are visible.
Thank you so much. If someone on the team was able to catch that glimmer of inspiration and wisdom that was shared, I think I was counting right. That was a beautiful alliteration of 6 P's, I think. If someone could please type that into the chat for us, attendees, to be able to take away and maybe have as a mantra and a reminder of Dr. Tommy Smith and his advice today. To move forward, I would love to have, there it is, pursue persistently, plan purposefully. Oh, someone missed a little piece of it.
Prepare prayerfully, proceed positively, pursue persistently, and plan purposefully.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Can we have the panelists back and spotlighted again? Have us all together, because I know all of us are having a hero's moment right now. We are just awestruck to be in your presence, Dr. Tommy Smith. I want to give our other panelists the opportunity to ask questions or two. So please open the floor to the other panelists so they can ask some questions as well.
Harrison had a question.
Yeah, okay, I can. Yeah, I'll go ahead and ask. So I think one of the biggest things that I've been noticing in the sports world recently with all the restarts and the bubbles is more than ever, so many viewers on Twitter or otherwise saying, keep politics out of the game. Don't bring your social message to the court or to the field or wherever, right? I'm wondering what message that you have for people that are saying things like that.
When you're hungry and you have an empty plate in front of you and you say, after not eating anything because there's nothing on the plate, I'm happy. You students, break that down and write me your answer. All it is, it takes it takes an answer like that to answer a question that the dictionary can't even put those words together. No politics in athletics. Why do athletes wear their country's uniform? Where does the impetus of competition start? What is the biggest money-making platform in the world? And you tell me one country that sends their athletes to competitions such as the Olympic Games and wear a uniform that doesn't have the country's color on it. I mean, these are sophomoric answers, but they're very true. You can see those. If I want to make it more political or I lose somebody, that I'm not going to do that. Let me say it even more stringent. Don't think one moment that athletics run without a political power. That's like gas in a car running on air. Not in the air, but on air.
Thank you for that answer. And just to notify everyone else, unfortunately, Rosalie had to leave us. She had to leave her study table by request of her coach. So she's out here grinding, working on that education. Unfortunately, she had to leave, but hopefully the team will connect her with you, Dr. Tommy Smith, so she can ask you any questions she may have had personally. Yeah, thank you again, Rosalie. You're not here. Thank you so much for your participation. I know everyone benefited from your presence and your words today. Mariah, did you have any questions for Dr. Tommy Smith?
Yes, so I know we have talked a lot about the power of youth and how young people are really the impetus behind change. But I know when you were standing on the podium, you had some older influences, namely Mr. Edwards and Mr. Harry Edwards. And he's also influenced CAP. And can you just touch on the benefit of mentorship and partnership between old and young?
Harry and I went to the same college. Harry was a freshman. Harry was a senior when I was a freshman at San Jose State. So we was at the same college, same time. We talked a bit during my freshman year and during the senior year. And one thing I remember about Harry stands 6'8", and he was about 255 when he was at San Jose State. So he was in my era, but he stepped away for a while to go to a post school for his after BA degree. He came back to San Jose State and taught a class. Isn't that something? Taught a class in the sociology of sport, and I took that class. And what he was talking about was the same thing that's going on then and it's going on now. Isn't it amazing that that happening has lasted over 50 years to this day? And he is a sociologist now, big time. I have taught college for 35, 36 years, and we're still doing the same thing. Shows you there's a need always for a movement forward. And I said this earlier, that you athletes, continue moving, because you're going to be asked these same questions later on down the line, and you're going to get to a point where you're going to say, again? Let me tell you this, yes, again. You make this move, you make that move, and you're going to be continuously asked questions on how did you do it? What can I do to help? But this is what we do. We conversate like we're doing now, and we move forward. So the generations make a difference only in age, not the need to fight for the right of man, the right of you who are an individual dealing with problems that you're dealing with now. And right now, I think it's systemic racism throughout this nation and calls for the younger generation to understand that there's more directions to do the same thing than talk about it. And yeah, Dr. Harry was at USC Berkeley after he left San Jose State, and he's still in that area. And he did work for the same staff as Colin Kaepernick left or was pushed out of. He also worked in baseball. He worked in a lot of areas because he is a sociologist, and he was there for the sake of the athletes, and the owners hired him just for that purpose because of his tenacity and truthful sight.
Thank you, Dr. Tommy Smith. I have a question myself. And although you are a phenomenal activist, you were also the Olympic champion in the 200-meter race in 1968. And I ran track too in high school. And I'm just a little curious to learn about how running was, like, the impact that had on your life and why you were involved in track and field, and just a phenomenal sprinter. So I just want to hear about that perspective as well, because you were an activist and athlete. So I don't want to diminish the athlete.
The platform, it was my platform. It was a way for me to move from where I was to where I wanted to go. Go, not at, but go, because I'm not finished yet. So it's still moving forward. Where I'm from, the same area that Colin Kaepernick is from, about 80 miles away. So we were raised up in the same areas of California. It was my way. Listen to this. Athletics, or track and field, football, basketball. I had a scholarship to 36 different colleges in basketball, football, and track. I could pick my own. I picked basketball. I went to college on the basketball scholarship, traded over to track once I got to San Jose State. But then I had to change over because the basketball court was really too small. Well, by the time I got to half of my speed, I was at the other end. And I crashed into the other end wall so many times, it would have been stupid for me to keep beating my brains out on a wall. So I decided, wait a minute, maybe I should go out for track. I'll have a little longer time to run. So that's what I did. And it fared me well, because I had a platform. I took that platform, stood on the platform. When I stepped down, I took the platform with me. So I'm still doing the same thing, and everybody loves a winner. At that particular time, I like pats on the back. Young folks, pats on the back, handshake, smiles in your face. But that doesn't work all your life. You'll have to put some words to it to make it solid or solidify the need for you to continue. Always have a road open for you to continue, and there's many roads out there. You don't have to be an athlete all your life. You don't have to be something that you want to be all your life. Change direction and do something different, or do two things at once, and you can do that too. Athletes.
Thank you, Dr. Tommy Smith. Harrison, Mariah, do you guys have any more questions for Dr. Tommy Smith? Alrighty, I think we're good, and I can't believe it, but our panel discussion is done. And what is wonderful and powerful is all the messages you've shared with us today. Thank you again, Dr. Smith. You got something to say?
For you, just for you. Everyone else can close your ears up if you want. You said you were a track and field guy. That's great.
Yes, sir.
But remember, the usage, and it's also for the brain, the usage of your muscles to their maximum without tensing up. If you can take that, categorize it in your own brain, you can use that in any part of your life that you want to go to, be in. It doesn't mean just your brain, the entire body. Use it to the fullest, but always control the speed so you won't blow up. That's a track and field additive.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Smith. Then thank you, Harrison. Thank you, Mariah. Thank you, Paolo. Paolo, Did you have any questions for Dr. Tommy Smith? Sorry, you weren't showing up on my screen, so I wasn't able to see you.
I would just ask, just with the NBA and NFL being played and players, you know, taking knees and wearing, you know, messages on their jerseys and stuff like that. You know, is there anything that you would change or anything else that you would do that they're not doing, or, you know, just anything that it's your opinion on it and whether you think, you know, there could be more done or just how you feel.
You know, I pride the athletes in using their voices, not only the physical part of their bodies, but their voices now to strengthen success. They're not afraid to stand up, speak up, and let their feelings be known. And I want everybody to know this, non-athletes also. If you are going to ride the cloud, make sure that you have a seat for someone else. Always try to leave space for you to take others along. Let's say for instance, smile at someone new today.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. So again, thank you everybody. Thank you Harrison. Thank you Mariah. Thank you Paolo. Thank you Dr. Tommy Smith. And thank you Rosalie, sending that out to the universe. But our conversation this was amazing, and it will not end here, you guys. For all of you guys tuning in, this will not end here. There's more to come. And I'm gonna turn it back to you, Gloria, to share what's next.
Okay. Wow. That was amazing. First, our moderator, Ty, fantastic job, guy. Thank you. Thank you so much. And thank you, Dr. Tommy Smith. And thank you for answering the phone. Your folk answered the phone when I call. I'm so thankful that you've been able to impart such wonderful wisdom with us today.
I enjoyed it.
Yes, thank you, sir. And to our youth advocates, thank you for all of the wisdom that you've imparted today as well. We're just so thankful. We're thankful for the Tommies, the Serenas, the Collins, you know, the Naomis of the world that have used their platforms to speak out against social injustices and have paved the way so that we can see more Tys, more Harrisons, more Mariahs, more Paulos, and more Rosalies. So thank you. Thank you so much for all of you for lending your voices today. Now, everybody who's in attendance, it's your turn to engage in the conversation and share your learnings and questions with one another. So there's a lot to unpack from what you heard today. And we know that the deepest learnings happens when you can discuss and continue to process together. So we encourage you to stay right here for virtual discussion in small groups, small community conversations that will happen in breakout rooms in just a moment. You may even have one of our panelists to pop in and join you. So that's pretty exciting. So hang tight for just a moment. I really wish we had more time, but we have to come to the end of this 3-part series today. Boy, we've had a lot of great discussions in part 1, part 2, and part 3. Yeah. So if we look back on what we learned, in part 1, we learned that coming together to advance equity and justice, it's a most beautiful thing. It really is. And in part 2, we learned that all barriers can be shattered, even those that are rooted in systemic racism. Together, we can unleash the potential for all for a better us. And today in part 3, we learned that elevating voices of those with lived experiences, especially our youth voices, past and present, benefit all of us. So even though the series is ending, our work together is really just beginning. So we invite you to pause, capture your comments to self, to advance your personal equity journey. we'd like to introduce you to an innovative tool called Future Me. And this was brought to my attention. I learned from Ty on this. The tool is called Future Me. So before you leave tonight, I invite you to visit futureme.org and send an email to your future self. Write your current thoughts and your emotions after viewing tonight's events. If you want to also include thoughts from parts 1 and part 2, feel free. And the commitments that you want to make to join us in advancing equity and justice for all. You can choose when you'd like to receive that email to your future self. It can be a week, a month, or even a year. When you receive your commitments in the future, this will be a reminder to stay the course, continue to learn, remain resolved and grounded in our mutual commitment to the future we want for our children. But in the words of Dr. Smith, to move forward, to move forward. Let this be your reminder of how you're committed to moving forward. So now I ask you to please stand by for a moment to see your assigned breakout room. The links are going to appear on your screen in just a moment. You will also find in the chat box a link to our survey. We value your feedback of the series. Please take a moment to complete it. And thank you everyone for joining us and taking this journey with us.